let's welcome Professor Faure, the Professor Emeritus from Columbia University, and he's also a leading scholar in Japanese Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism. Okay, Professor Faure.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank the organizer, in particular, Venerable Yifa. I'm very pleased to be here in Taiwan after many years. So it's a great honor for me. No, I must apologize. I don't have beautiful PowerPoint, beautiful diagrams to offer, just very old-fashioned paper. And I realized too late that it was much too long, so this morning I had to cut large chunks of it. So hope it's not as nuanced and cogent as I would hope. But anyway, let me try. Unfortunately, I don't have, the light here is not so great. Well, okay. So towards what I call one-dimensional Buddhism, taking the title from Herbert Marcus' famous book, The One-Dimensional Man, Mindfulness, Neuroscience, and Naturalism. As in the parable of the blind man and the elephant, governments and individuals have been trying to understand the multifaceted reality that confronts us with a growing urgency. Various levels of analysis have come to the forefront, leading to interrelated diagnoses such as global warming, the energy crisis caused by relentless extractivism, the demography, and the growing gap between the global north and south, loss of biodiversity and species extinction, the ravages of past imperialism and colonizations, present neocolonialism, etc. The distant causes are usually traced back to the rise of science and technology from the 17th century onward, with the French philosopher René Descartes as the main hero or villain, culprit, say. Since Descartes, the epistemological break between the world of objects and the world of subjects has been analyzed many times, and I don't need to dwell on it here. Let's just say that it led scientists to deny the ground of everyday experience from which their ideas emanated, and more generally, to consider that this break was not simply a research strategy, but that it was inscribed in the facts, in reality. From then on, nature became available for overexploitation by science and industry, just as newly discovered lands in the New World and elsewhere were for European colonizers. Brave new world indeed. The New World, foreshadowing Aldous Huxley's famous novel by the same title. Nature had begun to speak in mathematical language, but ancient nature, previously accessible to all, had gradually fallen silent. Two narratives, one of progress and one of decline, have been confronting each other. The narrative of progress has recently made a strong comeback or development with the digital revolution, the rise of neuroscience, and of artificial intelligence, AI. All this is well known. I would like to focus here on a particular, but in my view, fundamental aspect, the rise of naturalism as a philosophical or ideological underpinning of science and its pervasive influence on modern culture, and more specifically, in the present context, on Buddhism. As the Indian writer Amitav Ghosh has argued, in the era of what he calls the great derangement, great madness, if you like, it is no longer possible to carry on with our various political, economic, social, or simply intellectual activities as if nothing had happened. And yet, despite the COVID pandemic, nothing or very little seems to have changed. And the current enthusiasm for AI seems to be yet another symptom of denial. The ostrich its head in a hole, must be dreaming of immense virtual spaces, while a turkey on the eve of Thanksgiving must be dreaming of yet another bright tomorrow. So I'll be talking now about naturalism. Naturalism is a relatively recent trend in philosophy, but today almost everyone calls himself or herself a naturalist, without even clearly defining what the terms mean. At the risk of giving too simplistic a definition of it, I will say that the various strands of naturalism are implicitly defined by their opposite, supernaturalism, in all its form, and belief in supernatural events or persons. Now, neuroscience has become, I skipped quite a lot, so forgive me. Neuroscience has become the royal science, and Buddhism is no more for it than an exotic tribe enlisted in a scientific crusade. Buddhist modernism, which I call neo-Buddhism here, to emphasize its novelty, but also its links with neo-capitalism and neuro-ideology. As you see, all these are loaded terms, right? I intend to play the devil's advocate here. Or maybe Cassandra. So neo-Buddhism has become a danger for Buddhism. As Samuel Butler once wrote, there is no worse persecutor for the grain of corn than another grain of corn when it has completely identified itself with a hen. For the French anthropologist Philippe Descola, naturalism, despite its claim to tell the truth about the world, is in fact just another ontology, and also ideology, but ontology, that is a model of intelligibility of the world, among others. And Descola distinguished between the analogist, animist, and totemist ontologies on top of the naturalist, so 4 ontologies. The success of naturalism in the physical realm are usually invoked, but we are beginning to realize that, invoked as a proof of its truth. But we are beginning to realize, as we were just heard, that these successes may well herald a collapse of the human species with the advent of what some call the Anthropocene, right? A new geological era fabricated by human actions. Nevertheless, naturalism remains the horizon of those who seek to reject or relativize it. Naturalization has spread to almost every field, not only the natural sciences and epistemology, but also the so-called human sciences and philosophy, starting with analytic philosophy, but more recently also phenomenology, as well as religion, ethics, and above all, consciousness. The biologist Edward Osborne, E.O. Wilson, thus declared that the time had come to temporarily takes ethics out of the hands of philosophers and biologize it. For many scientists, however, since rejecting moral facts would undermine the ordinary morality of our society's need, morality should still be treated as a useful fiction. And I skip. All right. Oh my God. So the traditional problem of mind-body relations has been reformulated in the form of mind-brain relations. As we know, debates have continued between those who take the identity between brain and mind, that is something called eliminativism, a philosophical doctrine, and those who advocate the emergence of the mind from the brain, and that's called functionalism. In both cases, there is reductionism. The question has also arisen in terms of consciousness with what Australian cognitivist philosopher David Chalmers once called the hard problem, as opposed to the supposedly easy problems of various mental functions such as perception, memory, etc., or it's also called sometimes the explanatory gap. As William James a long time ago already pointed out, neurobiology can, or what was neurobiology at that time, can neither prove nor disprove the experience of mystics like St. Paul or Teresa of Avila. Yet brain imaging today strongly leans toward in the direction of a naturalism based on materialism and determinism. Neurobiologists all too often forget, however, that in so doing, they make certain leaps from, say, statistical measurement to the image of the brain, and then from the image to its psychological interpretation. So I had a long section on the critics of naturalism, which I won't get into. Just mention that, for instance, Edmund Husserl and William James had already noted that the naturalization of ideas as being the result of evolution deprive them, these ideas, of any claim to absolute truth, if not objectivity or intersubjectivity. Later on, Alvin Plantinga developed this criticism, which he calls the evolutionary argument against naturalism, EAAN. Analytic philosophers love acronyms. Continental philosophers don't, but anyway. Given naturalism and the evolutionary origin of our cognitive faculties, they are unlikely to be reliable, after all. Thus, naturalism itself would give reason to doubt naturalism, if it's just a product of evolution, as Darwin himself put it when he expressed his horrid doubt in a letter to William Graham dated July 3rd, 1881. If man is descended from the ape, who will trust the convictions of an ape's mind? So analytical philosophers confine themselves to purely logical arguments, however, for or against naturalism, on the value of philosophical naturalism, without even considering the deleterious impact of naturalism on living beings and their environment. The ecological crisis that threatens our very existence should lead us to believe that naturalism, by allowing the plundering of nature, has got it all wrong. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it because I had a hard time reading my stuff. Thank you. So I shift now to Buddhism and naturalism. The partisans of a naturalization of Buddhism invoke the necessity for the teaching of Buddha to adapt itself to a new context, the various forms of modernity, and the precedence of its adaptation to East Asian societies. Indeed, Buddhism has evolved over time while trying to preserve its specificity. But the new world of modernity and postmodernity perhaps poses a challenge of an altogether different kind. This is particularly true with the advent of neuroscience. Buddhist modernism has often been called Protestant Buddhism because it rejects ritual, superstition, and monastic hierarchy. It was, above all, a reaction against colonialism and Christian missionary expansion. Despite its radically new character, it presented itself as a return to its roots, a rediscovery of original Buddhism after more than 20 centuries of amnesia. Neo-Buddhism goes even further down this road, unabashedly blending an expurgated Buddhist teaching with the individualistic, hedonistic tendencies of our time. The spirituality of Neo-Buddhism, while it may have certain beneficial effects, is to Buddhism. Here, I had a number of metaphors which I skip. I'll just mention one. Neo-Buddhism is to Buddhism what salt marshes on the island in which I live now at the time are to the sea that periodically fills them. They are its extension, but they have lost its strength and dynamism, the waves, if you like, its depth and turbulence. Fish no longer comes here, but salt remains, right? The philosopher Owen Flanagan is among the first to have argued that for the naturalization of Buddhism. According to him, naturalized Buddhism is first and foremost a Buddhism without the mind-numbing and wishful hocus-pocus, such as rebirth, a karmic system without nirvana, without bodhisattvas flying on lotus leaves, without non-physical states of mind, unquote. In short, naturalized Buddhism is paradoxically a denatured Buddhism. Buddhist meditation has sometimes been perceived as a kind of Asian phenomenology. In discussion between Buddhists and neuroscientists, Buddhists have claimed a first-person approach to the mind, in opposition to the third-person approach of science, and they have insisted that the two approaches are complementary. The inner world would thus be the reserved domain or preserve of contemplatives. Buddhist meditation would immediately lead to deeper truths deeper than the merely intellectual truths obtained by Descartes in just 6 days of his metaphysical meditations. He has a book called Metaphysical Meditations. But introspection itself is not a sufficient criterion of truth, as the American philosopher J. Garfield once said, introspection does not even reveal to Buddhists the existence of the brain, right? So how much can you really trust introspection there? Paradoxically, first-person accounts of experience are rare or singularly devoid of affect and imagination. Wonderful stories of dreams and visions abound in the hagiographic sources, but they are almost totally absent from the doctrinal or philosophical sources, which seems to have been more about orthodox doctrine than personal experience. In the wake of Flanagan, some neo-Buddhists have also argued for a Buddhism without karma. The common Western criticism of karma is that it has encouraged fatalism and passivity in the face of various forms of oppression. Similarly, the notion of rebirth is said to diminish the search for justice in this world in favor of a kind of cosmic justice. The idea that the mind depends on the brain, which is a postulate of modern thought and neuroscience, means that life after death is impossible, since the brain ceases to function at death. Several religions accept the idea of an afterlife, but only religions of Indian origin have developed a real strong belief in afterbirth. Indeed, karma and rebirth are more important than meditation for most Buddhists. Not only all Buddhist ethics, but all Buddhist ontology and cosmology are based on karma, since it is karma that creates the world in which Buddhists live. But the notion of karma, or meaning act, implies an agent, sometimes responsible for the act. I'll skip all that. Neo-Buddhism thus proposes a psychologizing interpretation of Buddhism. But as the Belgian poet Henri Michaud once said, to put psychology everywhere is to like psychology, unquote. Whether the interpretation claims to be scientific, psychological, or humanistic, they all are essentially reductionistic, refusing to interpret the text literally, like a religious text supposed to describe the reality of an invisible world to which death gives us access. All right. If naturalism is defined as a rejection of supernatural entities and their interaction with our world, traditional Buddhism seems to take issue with the naturalistic approach and the theory of the physicalist enclosure of reality. Buddhism, it has often been repeated since the 19th century, is a religion without gods, or better still, a spirituality. But that's because the gods, like the natives conquered by the conquistadors, have been silenced. They exist nonetheless and come back to haunt our nights. They still manifest themselves in the vision and contemplation of those who welcome them, be they shamans, mainstream, or tantric Buddhists. They speak to us through such experiences, but their testimony is now rejected as too subjective and smacking of superstition. Subjective experience here, which is so prized in the case of meditation and contemplative science, is no longer appreciated. It is even scorned as a lapse in taste. For the Buddha, at least as we imagine him, supreme reality, the unconditional or absolute, was properly achintya, unconceivable. And he himself, who has attained this reality, is achintya. He is no longer simply the Indian philosopher that Western historians have made him out to be. If we take seriously the idea that the Buddha has attained this reality and that he has shown us the eightfold path to it, we have to ask ourselves what this would mean for science. Reality is multidimensional. I'm sorry, yes. What should I do? I have a whole section on AI. I was just coming to it. Bear with me for a minute. It won't be long. I'll just skip to that. Yeah. So naturalism blurs the border between humans and non-humans. On the machine side, the rapid rise of AI after a long incubation period is sometimes seen as a promise of salvation for humanity, sometimes also as a threat, echoed in numerous science fiction novels. I was going to talk about Kai Fu Lee in his recent book on AI, but I'll skip that. ChatGPT, I also skip that. Well, I'll skip everything. Sorry. Well, okay, digital naturalism is the culmination of a long evolution from infinitesimal calculus to cybernetics. Now, is reality infinite or simply infinitesimal? In Buddhist terms, can awakening, supreme consciousness, be digital or digitalized? Or to put it another way, can it be achieved by or with an AI? That's a question I will leave open there. AI is introducing to the multiverse a computer-generated environment inhabited and shared by lots of people at the same time. In that metaverse, everyone can look attractive, fashionable, and the epitome of cool. Race and gender will be your choice. We can all be, or at least look like, the person our dog thinks we are. Matthew Ball described the metaverse as a never-ending virtual world where everyone dresses up as comical avatars and competes within immersive VR games to win points, jumps into their favorite franchises, and act out their most impossible fantasies. Major corporations, as we might imagine, are already vying to dominate the metaverse because it opens up a new and seemingly infinite opportunity to extract data and sell ads. The porn industry is also poised to profit from it. All right, I'm being reminded that I'm over time, so let me just go to my quick conclusion. The ecological crisis that threatens our very existence should lead us to believe that naturalism has gone in the wrong direction. And Buddhism, by allowing itself to be naturalized, would be abdicating its role as a critic and alternative to become a docile element of the dominant ideology. In this sense, it could well be said that neuroscience and Buddhism are linked as elements, consenting or not, of neo-capitalist ideology. The balance sheet of naturalism is ambivalent. It has made science possible, but tends to prevent us, as the German poet Hölderlin put it, from poetically inhabiting the world. It casts an important part of reality into the shadows, creating a world without shadows, illuminated by the white light of neon. In this digitized world, sfumato, which used to be to render the depths of beings and things, becomes impossible. In the age of great derangement, again, Amitav Ghosh, we live under the spell of modernity and progress. Buddhism should serve to wake us up, not to comfort us in our dogmatic slumber. Naturalism is not the answer. It has contributed to emptying the world of meaning. On the other hand, Buddhism can question the materialistic basis of our lives by moving away from its psychologizing definition to bring back a sense of reality and of the unity of the subject and the lived experience. What happens when we take Buddhism seriously, warts and all? Instead of settling for an idealized, watered-down image, a Nutella Buddhism, or reducing it to a set of beliefs and symbols. In the words of the Buddhist scholar Donald Lopez, the Buddha, I quote, presented a radical challenge to the way we see the world. A certain value lies in remembering that challenge from time to time, unquote. Accepting that challenge may be one of the ways to surf the tidal wave that's coming. Thank you, and sorry for the